So Jamie Herrera Butler was super excited to impeach President Trump and really excited about Nancy Pelosi's Kabuki Theater January 6th commission. She's refused to come on this program. She and her good friend, colleague Dan Newhouse, both of them pseudo-Republicans, are not willing to come on the program. They've made that quite clear by not coming on the program. I've given them 3 questions in advance. I will ask Heidi St John, who is running against Herrera Butler, a choice for you, an alternative. I'll ask Heidi St John those questions and more. She joins us exclusively.
Live and local on AM 770 KTTH. Your independent conservative host, Todd Herman, welcomes you to The Todd Herman Show.
That if you are not using your witchcraft to confront, address, and dismantle white supremacy as it lives inside of you and your ancestral legacy, you are not only doing this wrong, but you, my dear, are part of the problem.
The voice of an American teacher. On this day, the day the Lord has made, in these times through which God has decided we shall live. It is an issue in Washington State, the separate country thereof, or it's an election there in Washington State. It is a national issue, and that is Republicans like Jamie Herrera Butler, who were absolutely thrilled to see Donald Trump impeached and to involve themselves in the January 6th commission while ignoring other vital things happening in our country, and yet expects to be reelected. So she has a couple of opponents. One of them joins me. Heidi St John is running for Congress. She has a podcast, 1 million downloads a month. It's called Off the Bench. That's a huge number, by the way. She's an author of 8 books. She's a nationally known speaker in the homeschool community, which is, how long have I said get your kids out of the government schools? And she and her husband started a homeschool resource center. It's in Vancouver, Washington, opened with 400 students last year, now has 1,400 enrolled. Heidi St John joins us on the Todd Herman Show. Heidi, appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much.
Hey, I appreciate you having me. Good morning.
Yeah, congrats on the podcast numbers. Those are really big.
Thank you. We're coming up on 8 years doing that show. So, and you know what? The world's on fire, and I'm not afraid to talk about any of it. I think that's part of the reason why it's doing well right now. People want to hear the truth.
I think they do. Let's start with this. Why do you think that so many Republicans are furious with Herrera Butler impeaching President Trump?
She's tone deaf. I mean, I think I would start there. There's so many reasons. The impeachment of President Trump was just, at least for me, it was just the icing on the cake. It was the cherry on top. I don't understand why she's not on the floor of the House of Representatives screaming about critical race theory and what's happening in the schools here in Washington State. There's so many reasons. And I think as you're watching this sort of vendetta, this sort of never Trumper in her come out, we saw this again yesterday with Steve Bannon and her decision to get behind, the prosecution of Steve Bannon. I don't understand why she has not been more vocal in defense of what's happening here, but she doesn't come here. So it makes sense that she'd be out of touch with the voters in Washington State. She rarely comes home. She moved there and pretty much packed it up and hardly ever comes home. And I think that's part of the reason.
Oh, yeah. I mean, really, when D.C. becomes your home, you're done, because D.C. is recession-proof. It's depression-proof. If they want more money, they take more money. They simply cannot maintain any contact with reality when people kowtow to you and bow to you and you have a staff running you around. It's so difficult to maintain any equilibrium as a human being. Now, Heidi, you mentioned that the disconnect, the emotional disconnect, the tone deafness. Did she say anything about Antifa and the political murder that happened just down the street from Vancouver in Portland, and the shooter then fled into Washington State? Has she ever approached Antifa? And let me ask you a 2-part question about that. That's first part. Did your opponent, Herrera Butler, Heidi St John, did she ever say anything about Antifa?
Not to my knowledge. I mean, if she did, I missed it. I think most of Washingtonians missed it if she did say something. She's kind of like, I told my husband, months ago, she's like a wallflower, in Washington, D.C. And a very good friend of mine who's lived in D.C. for years and years said the same thing that you just said. When D.C. becomes your home, it's time to quit representing the people that the state that you came from originally. Go back and get reacquainted again. And I think that's where it's at.
So the second part of the Antifa question, how do you describe Antifa?
They're terrorists. I don't know another way to describe them. But apparently the Department of Justice now thinks that parents who go to school board meetings are terrorists, and they're not addressing the problem of Antifa either. And so it seems to me that there's a lot of tone deafness going on. And actually, I think being tone deaf is probably too nice. These people know what's going on, but they're living the high life in Washington, D.C. And like you said, what's happening here doesn't affect what's happening there. And so I don't think they're listening. I don't think they care.
Well, I think that's very evident. So we talked about Antifa, and you mentioned critical race theory, and we'll dig into that and your solutions and what you hope to accomplish in Congress. How do you describe the group Black Lives Matter Incorporated?
They're Marxists. Patrisse Cullors has said it herself, one of the co-founders of Black Lives Matter. Listen, I've been speaking about Black Lives Matter all over the United States. I spoke to a group of high schoolers in the Los Angeles School District not too long ago and educated them about it. These people are anti-family. They're anti-government. They really are trained Marxists who are completely dedicated to upending what they see as a wrong social order in the United States. They don't care about black people. At the end of the day, they're a political ideology. They don't care about the black unborn. They don't care about black conservatives. They don't care about black police officers. They only care about pushing a political ideology.
Heidi St John's with us. You can hear her. You can see why her podcast has done so well. Off the Bench, about 1 million downloads a month, and an author of 8 books. So in going back to D.C., how do you, Heidi St John, possibly go even approach fixing this utterly dysfunctional, broken, corrupt body?
Well, I think the first thing that I would say is just to acknowledge that one congressperson can't fix anything. So we need to have a whole lot of people who have the same desire to see this country returned to the constitutional republic that was given to us when it was founded. And my hope would be to go there and find like-minded people who are ready and willing to do the hard work of rolling up our sleeves for the American people and undoing some of the disastrous policies of the Democrats. These people are socialists and communists. And we are seeing really the destruction of the United States from the inside out, and it's a shameful moment for freedom in this country. And so I'm already making connections there and talking to people who are like-minded. Someone said to me not too long ago, if you go and replace Jamie Herrera Butler, you're going to be a freshman, and freshmen can't do anything. And I said, have you ever heard of AOC? Ever heard of Lauren Boebert? Ever heard of Marjorie Taylor Greene? These women were freshmen, are freshmen, and they're getting in there and they're moving the needle. Right now, the Congress is being driven by dangerous Democrats and weak Republicans who don't have the backbone to stand up to the socialist radicals that are running the Congress. And I am not like that. I'm not a wallflower, and I care about this country. My grandchildren are being raised right now in the 3rd Congressional District in Washington State, and I'm leaving it all on the field to represent them.
Okay, so you mentioned weak Republican leadership, and you and I agree on that.
Yeah.
Tell me about in office right now. Tell me, name for me a strong Republican leader.
I'd probably put Jim Jordan at the top of the list. Watching him, I watch him on the regular. I had an opportunity to talk to him recently when I was in Washington, D.C. And I really am encouraged by people like Rand Paul. Obviously, he's in the Senate, but encouraged by people who are speaking out and telling the truth about what's happening with COVID-19 under the direction of Father Fauci, the high priest of the Branch Covidians. I don't know why we have allowed a virus with a 99.9% survival rate to cripple the greatest nation on the face of the earth. And I think when this is over, people are going to go to prison, and it will be over. The question is, what will the United States look like when it's over? We will either be stronger because we will have realized that our freedom can be stolen from us, or we will lose our freedom altogether. I literally think it's that. I think that's what we're up against right now.
Well, I'm encouraged to hear that, because it is not a usual thing for Republicans to speak against the Church of Pharmaganda and the propaganda being issued by this Church of Pharmaganda. And a lot of people are just flat owned. So who's your biggest donor?
I have no idea who my biggest donor is. I don't know.
I love that. Good answer.
I literally
you really
don't know. Should I be embarrassed? I don't know.
No, actually, that's the greatest answer I've ever heard. I'm glad you don't know. Let's go through a speed round after we check traffic with the right way traffic. Let's talk about how to approach schools. Let's talk about, you mentioned the injection diktats. Let's talk about unwinding that. And then let's just talk about you and how on day one you hope to go and approach this. And you mentioned building partnerships, et cetera. And then I want you to talk to my national audience because, like you, we've got a great big podcast audience. I would like you to help us understand how to find people like you in states around the country, because if we don't, we're over. And I was in, I believe it was Denver, Colorado, and I was giving a speech about technology. I'd been the chief digital strategist for the Republican National Committee. I was giving the speech, and she approached me, and she was very put together, very poised, handed me her business card with both hands. And I said, and I just looked at her, I said, so when are you running for Congress? And she said, oh, my gosh, how'd you know that? I said, because of the way you approached me, because of how you're dressed, because of your poise, right? So at that point, she was actually a very nice person and a very approachable person. And I thought very aware. I firmly believe that she has been completely corrupted by D.C. So let me ask you this. How do you avoid becoming similarly corrupted, Heidi St. John?
Well, I think the first way you avoid it is you stay grounded in the life that you actually have. You know, our founding fathers never meant for people to go and live in Washington, D.C. We're supposed to be representing a particular area. And my roots are in CD3. I'm raising my family, all 7 of our children, in Southwest Washington State. And so I have no intention of moving there. People keep asking me that question. And I think you stay grounded by talking to the people that you're representing. A representative is not there to rule the people. They're there to serve them. And how can you serve the people if you're never home talking to the people and saying, hey, I made this decision. How did that affect you? Hey, I heard about this happening on the I-5 corridor. I hear you guys are having trouble with broadband. How's that affecting you? Jamie's not doing that. And to be fair, I voted for Jamie. All 5 cycles that she's been in there, I did not see a better person there. And over the years, I've kind of started to plug my nose as I voted for her. But I think you're absolutely right. I think she started off with good intentions. And I think it would have helped her if she would have stayed home or at least come back and forth more. You know, as a national speaker, in fact, I'm in North Carolina right now. I travel routinely from the West Coast to the East Coast. I'm used to the time change. I'm used to the brutal business of flying east to west. On the regular, and I intend to do that from Washington, D.C., should I get elected. And so I really do think that's how you do it. You know, I want to continue going to the same church. I want to continue having potlucks on Sunday afternoons. I think you stay in touch with the people and you don't let D.C. become your home. And I really do think that's a huge part of the problem.
So let's shift gears back to COVID. Then I want to get specifically into the schools. Then I want you to tell me how people like you, how folks can find people like you, because we've got very good numbers in North Carolina, by the way, on our podcast, just so you know that. Let's start with this. No, it's very cool. Look, it's a mind blower. I mean, you know this. It's a mind blower to get notes from this morning. I have an email, gentleman from Oklahoma. I regularly get notes from Florida, and it's an amazing thing. And in me, I got a hand up because of EIB. God rest Rush. I got to do his show, so we got this hand up. But there is a nationwide push coming, and people need to understand this. These injection diktats in Washington State that have been now Jay Inslee, the dictator of Washington State, has used to fire cops and school teachers. What he's done is he's cleansed government of people who will not take ridiculous orders, is the way I see it. Do you think that the injection diktats, do you think they're legal? Do you think they're moral? And should people refuse to? Do you think businesses should stand up and say, we're not doing this? Or do you think this is a law and we should follow it?
No, it's criminal behavior. And they have been able to do this. I mean, right down from Joe Biden, right? He knows that what he's doing is unconstitutional, right? When he's actually thinking, he might have one coherent thought a day. And I think in that coherent thought, he thought to himself, this isn't constitutional, but I'm going to try it anyway because we're in power. That's how the Democrats work. And that's how Jay Inslee is working. King Inslee, this guy who is ruining thousands of lives in Washington state. The suicide rate, I talked to a firefighter in Seattle not too long ago who told me with tears in his eyes that they take more suicide calls right now than any other call. And the fact of the matter is people are dying, literally dying. And the government is replacing people of courage and people of moral fortitude with Lord only knows who. You're absolutely right. They're displacing good people and replacing them with I don't even know who. This is a terrifying moment for the country. And if you think about it, they're replacing people for the simple reason that they do not want to participate in a medical experiment. That's what it comes down to. That's the bottom line. This is driven by greed, it's driven by money, and it's driven by a desire to be in power. And I believe that they're using COVID because the infrastructure for the hostile takeover of the most amazing nation on the face of the earth, the United States, is already in place. The radical left, they own our universities, they own our elementary schools and our high schools, they own big pharma, they own major media, and now they're using a virus with a 99.9% survival rate to implement this change and take the American people hostage. And what we have found in the last 17 months is it's very easy to scare people and very hard to unscare them. And we need to stop operating in fear. It's that spirit of fear that is literally making us a slave to these people.
That's really well said. The government schools, are they enemies to the minds of children?
They're enemies to the United States. I mean, absolutely, they're enemies to the minds of children. You know, we're taking our very, very youngest now. It's the law, right, in Washington State. And Chris Reitzel, who lies to everyone and says, well, it's, critical race theory is not the law. To students, we're just teaching it to staff and teachers. Well, that's the same thing. That's their tacit admission that they're teaching this racist garbage to our teachers and to staff members so they can pass it along to the students. And I was at the very front of Referendum 90. We worked very hard in Clark County, especially to get Ref 90 on the ballot. I have been speaking out about and fighting against comprehensive sex education for years and years. This is garbage sex education. I had a parent come up to me and say, I can't believe that you're so backwards. You don't want kids to know how their own bodies work, and you don't want girls to know how they get pregnant. Listen, I told her, this is comprehensive sex education has 1% to do with that and 99% to do with the radical sexualization and sexual indoctrination of children. And if parents would take the time to read this curriculum like I have, it is funded by Planned Parenthood and by GLSEN and by all kinds of organizations who are hell-bent on telling children that there are 400 genders and that their gender is just something that they can decide from day to day, whatever mood they happen to be in. And it literally is turning children against their parents, who by the time they figure out this is going on, cannot understand where their children went. It's starting in the schools. And I've been telling parents for a long time, pull your children out of these schools. The only language that the schools speak is money. And I know it's hard for people. And a lot of parents are like, oh, I could never do that. My kids don't respect me. My kids won't listen to me. Well, that's a parent problem, number one. I understand the job problem. That is a tougher one to overcome. But what have we learned in this last year, Todd? We learned that we would pull our children out of school if there was a 99.9% survivable virus going around the schools. And my warning to parents, my sincere warning, is that the virus that is in the schools right now, the real one, is the indoctrination that's happening through these radical leftists who have disguised themselves as teachers. They're not teachers, they're activists. And I know that there are lots of good teachers in there. I met a bunch of them. Several of them are in my own family. But the fact of the matter is their hands are largely tied. They're unable to tell the truth. They are unable to stand against this for fear of losing their jobs. And parents need to be awake. At this point, you have to be willfully ignorant to not know what is happening in the schools.
Yep. And this note, someone just came in. Nice talk. She'll be winning until 4 a.m. and then lose. That's Washington State. Voters get found. I know that's a lot to hand you with about 45 seconds left, but are you concerned about vote fraud?
I am concerned about voter fraud, but I want to keep my eyes on. They want us to be concerned so that we're disenfranchised, so that we don't vote. And I've heard, President Trump came out last week and said, hey, until the 2020 election is figured out, Republicans should not vote. I could not disagree with that more. While there are lots of people who are working even right now all over Washington State to adjudicate and figure out what happened in 2020, but we've got to keep our eyes forward. My eyes are forward. People need to show up. Republicans need to show up in droves to vote. We need to be watching the polls. We need to be paying attention, but we can't stay home. We cannot stay home.
Absolutely. My friend Glenn Morgan with WeTheGovern.com is doing a fantastic job of teaching activists how to avoid and conquer and find and spotlight vote fraud, how to clean up the vote rolls. How do people get in touch with you real quick? Heidi St John running against Jamie Herrera Butler, who's abandoned America entirely. How do people get in touch with you, Heidi St John?
You can find me online at Heidi St John for Congress.com. As you know, we have to raise a whole lot of money. I've got a huge fundraising goal that's set for the end of this quarter. And so if people are interested in having me represent them and being a voice for freedom on the floor of the House of Representatives, I could sure use your help. Heidi St John for Congress.com.
All right. Appreciate you coming on. Go with God's good grace, Heidi. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, Todd Herman Show will continue. And I shared the most consequential update on COVID earlier. Let's talk about the actual implications of this in terms of humanity next.